Hi, I'm Amber Mack, and I'm here with Safi Bahcall, who is the author of the bestseller Loonshots. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
My first question for you is, what is the difference between a moonshot and loonshot?
Well, moonshot is a big goal, a destination. But if you look back at science, business, or history, the big ideas, the one that really changed our world, rarely arrive with blaring trumpets or red carpets dazzling everybody with their brilliance. They're usually the ones that have been dismissed or neglected for years or sometimes decades. They're champions written off as crazy. Since there wasn't a good word in the English language for that, I just made one up.
It's interesting too, in your book, you talk about some of the most successful stories, but you also talk about the narrative that we hear over and over again when it comes to businesses and organizations that are successful. We assume that they took a straight path to success, but that's not the case.
No, if you look at most of the big products or inventions or strategies, they failed many, many times. So if Facebook wasn't the first social network, Google wasn't the first search engine, there were many, many iterations before they found one that worked. And many products, one of the things that was really interesting when I was doing the research for this book is that so many big products or strategies or ideas failed many times before they succeeded. And what makes that so important is that there's this mantra out there in the business world or among startups and entrepreneurs, fail fast and pivot. If something doesn't work, just take a sharp right turn and go somewhere else. I'll give you an example from one of the most important medical breakthroughs of the last century, and that is the statins, the drugs that lower cholesterol. The first time that was suggested, maybe we should lower cholesterol, people started these big studies to eat less cholesterol, and those were a complete bust. So scientists working on that project to create a new drug that lowers cholesterol, most of them gave up, fail fast and pivot. Okay, it doesn't work, let's do something else. Next, biologists came up with this reasoning, wait a minute, every cell in your body has cholesterol. If we take a drug, it's just going to poison every cell in your body. That's a disaster. Fail fast and pivot. The scientist who turned out to discover that drug kept going. When he finally got a drug, he tested it, what you always do in drug discovery, you tested it early in the lab in animal models. Usually you do mice or rats. Complete failure. Fail fast and pivot. Turns out, discovered much later, that mice and rats only have good cholesterol, HDL. Statins work by lowering bad cholesterol. It was a false fail. It was an example there was a flaw in the test. He kept going. It was one of the great medical breakthroughs of the last probably 50 years. It saved millions of lives, and in total, it's been roughly $1/3 of $1 trillion from that product. Had anybody followed the advice to fail fast and pivot, they would have missed out, and many, many did.
What does this mean for entrepreneurs or business leaders? If we look at an example like you just mentioned, what type of framework should they consider?
Well, the way I always think about it it's a guy named Sir James Black told me that one time. In my field, which is drug discovery, I was pretty depressed one evening, and Sir James, who was meeting with us, was asking me what was wrong, and I said, well, we had this project in the lab and it didn't work out, and he kind of leaned over and he patted my knee and he said, oh my boy, it's not a good drug unless it's been killed 3 times. And that's one of the things you learn the hard way as an entrepreneur is the really good projects fail. Like search engines, everyone had given up on search engines. Why? This is, obviously 15, 20 years ago, but people said, well, how can you make any money in search? Look at all these little search companies and search portals, none of them make any money, so let's just give up and move on. And so everyone passed on the idea of a new search engine, which was called Google. Of course, $1 trillion later, that was a mistake.
Is there a risk in today's world in terms of encouraging people to pursue crazy ideas? I mean, a lot of people who are watching probably love this dialogue and think, okay, you know what, I'm going to go after my idea. But when is it time to stop? When is it time, to take a new direction? Because there is a lot at risk.
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk about that with entrepreneur friends all the time. How do you know the difference between stubbornness and persistence? And for me, I have a litmus test. I think of it as LSC. I don't have a very good memory, so I can only remember in acronyms. LSC I think of as listen to the suck with curiosity. So here's what I mean by that. If you're working enormously hard on some project you are really excited about, and you put your heart and your soul into it, and then you present it to an investor and they just dismiss it, or a customer not interested, or you have a partner walks away, it's crushing. Your first reaction is you want to punch him in the face. That's not a very good reaction. Your second reaction might be, if you've been a little trained, you're like, well, acknowledge that and move on. Thank you, I heard you. That's listening and acknowledging. That won't get you very far either. The really great entrepreneurs investigate. They put on their Sherlock Holmes hat. They set aside the urge to punch in the face, set aside that emotional response, and start pulling on that thread. Help me understand. It's hard to get from people but walk me through. When they pull on that thread, eventually they might find a little piece of gold at the end, which is a little nugget that they didn't understand. This thing rubbed me the wrong way, or there's this competitor you never heard about, which is why we're using this other product. So when you listen to that suck, but with curiosity, really try to investigate, that's where you get the little pieces of gold that can make all the difference.
I've read through the book, and at the end of the book you have a glossary of terms, and I thought this was really interesting in terms of providing this information for your readers. One of the terms that you talk about is the Moses trap. What does that mean?
Moses trap is what often kills companies, especially today, because today in magazine articles, online, there's this sort of glorification of what turns out to be a false image of a great leader, and that's the leader is a Moses who stands on top of a mountain, raises his or her staff, and anoints the chosen project to create the holy Loonshot, and parts the seas to make way for that. But that's not the way really great companies get built. That might last 1 or 2 cycles of products, but then that leader on the mountain will make a mistake, and some other competitor will just wipe him out. The truly great leaders lead much more like a careful gardener. They separate their artists working on creative ideas and their soldiers who are turning them into real products. They manage the touch and the balance between those two, and they manage the transfer, not the technology, because most failures are due to the transfer between crazy new ideas and products that work. That transfer between the artists working on this stuff and the soldiers getting it done is where so many things fail, because these two groups speak different languages, they value different things. So the really great leaders manage much more by thinking about the touch and balance between those two and nurturing them and taking care of them and focusing on their interplay and exchange rather than being a Moses with a staff.
It seems in 2019 that we need a book like this. We also need those crazy ideas if you look at what's taking place in the world. Why do you think the timing is right for people to read this book?
Well, I think you're right. I think we've gotten stuck in our culture. There's a focus on pessimism. There's a spread of conflict, of anger and pessimism, and it almost seems to be inevitable. It's like a giant battleship just moving along the ocean, almost getting worse and worse. And if we want to turn that around, we need some new crazy ideas. And that's happened many times in history. Some crazy ideas could turn the course of a war. Some crazy ideas could create a whole new industry. A crazy idea in my field in drug discovery, a crazy idea of growing proteins in the lab and using that as, for example, as insulin. That was a crazy idea. Everyone said, no, you can never grow a protein in a lab and inject it into a human body. You'll kill people. Well, you've saved millions of lives because of that. So if you really want to change the world, you need to nurture these crazy ideas. And I think right now, we really need to change. There are a lot of changes we need, whether climate change or political environment. Big changes require crazy ideas.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Amber.